Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. In this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, I'm so pleased to have with us Natasha Porrizkova. She serves as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for Nika White Consulting. She brings to the team years of experience as a marketer and content creator. She decided to pivot from marketing upon realizing her true passion and calling was for diversity, equity, and inclusion. She now works to marry marketing and DEI to maximize impact and change. We're pleased to have with us on the show today to share how she got to the driver's seat, Natasha Porizkova. Natasha, so pleased to have you with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Simone. I am thrilled to be here. So I am Natasha Porrescofa. I am a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for Nika White Consulting. I've been with the firm for about 8 months now. As I was saying to you earlier, I started out as a marketing specialist and pivoted after a couple of months to be the DEI Manager. I come from a background in marketing, specifically working in entertainment marketing. And when I discovered that diversity, equity, and inclusion was a workforce that you could go into, I knew that this was my calling, that this was my passion, this is what I needed to do. A little bit about me as my personal life. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a Texas girl originally. I just moved here pre-pandemic, so I still feel like I just moved. I moved here with my recent fiance. She and I got engaged a few months ago. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
Congratulations. That's awesome. So, making the decision to pivot careers is a pretty big deal, and entering the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion space can be challenging. So how did you get that aha moment and decide to just go all in to pivot into that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was really 2 light bulb moments. And the first light bulb moment happened years ago working at the Performing Arts Center where I'd been for years. And one of my jobs was to proof the Broadway program. So before we printed the 30,000 copies of our versions of playbills for Broadway shows, I had to go through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that there weren't any errors, everything was good to go. And one day the program happened to be sitting at my desk open to the staff page, and it was just like a glaring light looking at me. And I sat and I realized something really huge, that at our organization, I did some counting, and of our employees, 44 were white, and only 2 of them didn't have manager, director of, vice president of, chief of attached to their title. And then there were 6 people of color. And of the 6 people of color, there was only 1 of us who had a manager title, and that's as high as it went. And so I realized these stark inequities within our organization, and I was upset and I was frustrated as a person of color myself, and that we weren't being invested in. So I took it to HR. I said, hey, whether unconscious or not, you're not investing in us. And I'm not saying go hire a bunch of people of color, but pay attention to those of us that are here, because we're being looked over and our counterparts are being promoted at a fast rate. And so that was the first moment that I realized that there were issues specifically in the workplace that I was working in, and I took it upon myself to be the undercover DEI person, which I didn't realize was what I was actually doing. And so that was the first light bulb. And the second light bulb that was very important was I attended, the company HubSpot has a giant conference that they host every year. And about a year and a half after that experience, I was sitting in the keynote for the co-founder Dharmesh Shah, and he was talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, and that it was a necessary career field. And that's when the really big light bulb moment went off, that I thought, aha, you can actually work in this field. It's not just a passion project. It's not just a moral imperative. You can actually do this work and help people for a living. And it was at that moment that I knew that I needed to pivot, turn the horse around, do whatever I needed to do to get into this field.
Nice. Well, let's go back to light bulb one for a moment. Where does the moxie come from to say, you know what, here's some inequities, HR, and you need to do something about it? Where does that come from?
I've always had a pretty good amount of confidence. I think it's one of my greatest strengths, my confidence in myself. And I didn't fear losing my job. And even if I did, I could have used that to say I brought upon these inequities and I was fired as a result of it. I wasn't necessarily worried about that, but because I had passing identities that I could very easily be seen as white. I'm not 100% Mexican, which is what I'm mixed with. But I just wasn't comfortable sitting and stewing and knowing and having this information in my back pocket. So I had confidence. I had the numbers. I could say, you can't argue with the data. It's right here, plain for all to see. And so with the data in my pocket and the confidence that I have in myself, I went to HR and I said, hey, look at this and let's do something about it.
That's awesome. So you were able to migrate into this new focus area in your career. What are some of the steps you took to make this dream a reality?
Yeah, so it was not a quick shift, that is for sure. So when I originally realized that this is where I wanted to go, the sacrificial lamb, unfortunately, that was George Floyd's murder, had not yet occurred. And that was the moment, as we all know in this space, that really got organizations to open their eyes and say, oh, we need to get our stuff together. We need to implement this in our workplace. And we really need to check how our people are doing and be active and be allies and advocates. And so when I initially realized, it was September of 2019, and the first thing I had to do was I had to leave my job. And fortunately, I was sort of pushed to do so, because that's when my partner and we were moving. She had gotten a job in Boston, and that was the big shove I needed to quit my job and say, I need to start doing this actively and really put myself out there. So it was about a year in total when the process started. I moved up to Boston. I started to get really connected. And through that whole process, that's where my trajectory to get into this field started.
So what advice would you give to someone who is wanting to take ownership of their career?
Yeah, so like I said, for me, a big part of my success is my confidence. So I always want to impart upon people to be confident in the decisions that you're making, be confident in yourself. Even if you have to fake it until you make it, being proud of who you are and the decisions you're making and really owning what you're doing. For me, I think that was really imperative, to own myself, but also surround myself with people that I knew would be on this journey alongside me. I've been able to go through a lot of things, do a lot of incredible things throughout my life because of the people I've surrounded myself with. So I think it's a mixture of owning your own self and owning your decisions and saying, yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm confident in it. And also having those people around you to hold you up when you're struggling, be your cheerleaders through the good and the bad. And the combination of the two is just, for me, it's been a magic combination.
If you had to title your career body of work, what would you, if you had to title a book based on your career, what would the title of the book be?
So the title would probably be Making Moves, Career Moves. And within it, I would go through the different moves that I went through. Because I'm a dancer, not in a professional sense, really just for fun and for my own personal hobbies. And I like making moves because it refers to, movement and dancing and being active. And also in the sense of, I'm going to actively make moves to change careers. And so it would be that, making moves, career moves.
I love it. Natasha, with the work that you're doing and, your diverse career experiences, what resources would you recommend to our audience for taking ownership of their career? What have you found to be helpful to you on your journey?
In this space, education is everything. We can't become complacent. We have to constantly be educating, exposing ourselves to new ideas. I always say we're all ignorant to something. And I think that the word ignorance gets a bad rap because, you say ignorant and some people think, I'm pigeonholing here. I'm not saying this is the standard, but some people think, someone who lives in the middle of nowhere, you know, doesn't know a whole lot of things, but it's really a lot more than that. Like I said, I'm ignorant to things that I'm unaware of. And so educating ourselves and learning what we don't know. For myself, I got really ingrained in the Jennifer Brown community call specifically. Actually, that's really what launched my whole career into this space. I think the more that you know, the less you'll feel imposter syndrome because you have that information. You can say, I know this, I've learned it from different experts. I've just really been a sponge to learn as much as I can. So I recommend to all people who want to be in the space and are trying to make the move, just to keep educating yourself, keep pushing yourself, keep reading books, keep listening to podcasts, listen to the Simone Morris podcast, get out there and hear what other people have to say, because the more diverse perspectives we have, the better perspective we can bring to whatever space that we're in.
Absolutely. I found education to be quite the lever, and there is so much that we don't know in this space and in anything in general. I think education allows you to level up in so many instances. Formula for owning your career?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, it's a mix of owning my own perspectives, and when I really decide I'm going to do something or that I'm going to commit to something, sticking to it full on, listening to what other people have to say, but knowing this is what I want and this is what I'm going to do, and having those other people to add in and say, be your cheerleaders, be there to push you to think of different perspectives. It's that mix of the two. Continuing to educate yourself. So education, individuals, and confidence in your own self.
Any tips on how to build those confidence muscles?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that for me, again, tying back to being a dancer, I think being comfortable in your own physical skin can be huge. Especially for women, we are via the media and social media and everything, we're taught to be disgusted or disappointed or frustrated with the way that we look. And when we're uncomfortable with how we look, it's hard to want to own anything about ourselves or own our thoughts because we feel like they're not valid or they're not good enough or they're not perfect enough. And so it kind of starts with owning your own physical self. I'm actually taking a course right now that Jamila Jamil, the actress, created called Body Neutrality. And thinking about your body, it's different than body positivity. It's more of being content with where you are, the way you look, what you're experiencing, and not spending so much time focusing and nitpicking on different parts of you. And when we can love ourselves and not focus on that, then we can really start to think about our ideas and not nitpick that, and really have an opportunity to grow and think about how can I continue to try. We're going to fail a lot. So that's important to remember too, that no matter how many times, we're not going to always get it right. But taking the focus off of what do we look like and think about what are the thoughts that I have and how can I turn them into good, or continue to go to the table, succeed, fail a bunch more times and succeed. I don't know if that answered the question, a little off tangent, but.
No, I think it's a valuable resource, and we'll try to drop it in the show notes as if there are others who are interested in that course. I think that's great. There's so much work to do. Was there ever a time where you felt like you were not in the driver's seat for your career, and how did you manage to get to the driver's seat?
Yeah, so at my last organization, I didn't always feel that I was in the driver's seat. I definitely felt stifled by my situation at times, specifically in the department. I felt like that there was a ceiling, that I couldn't get higher. I couldn't go and do more things within the organization. which ultimately, like I said, I ended up leaving and pivoting careers completely. But it was in that moment that I realized I needed to challenge myself more. I needed to have more opportunities and create them for myself if they weren't going to be apparent within the organization. So for me, that meant looking to other departments in the organization to say, hey, how could I help out? To specifically, I was working in social, what are some projects that we can work on together to really enhance your department? Because like I said, I wasn't in control. I felt like my boss was wonderful, but there were limitations. And so for me, it meant outsourcing. If I couldn't grow upwards, I had to grow out, and I had to be able to let my limbs bring other opportunities to me that I wasn't able to get shooting straight up.
I love that. I love that visual that just came up for me. It went back to the dance moves that you were talking about. But, that's amazing. It all ties back together. Well, it's been such an honor to have you on the show. I wonder if you could share with our audience how they could stay connected with you if they'd like to do so.
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is Natasha Porrizkova, and also my Instagram is a great way to reach out to me as well. It's natasha.page. And yeah, I would love to connect, interact with all of you. I'm always, I think in the space, especially who is important. It's more than just having a network. It's about creating genuine relationships. And so I love meeting new people and interacting with them. So yeah, reach out via LinkedIn, Instagram. I'd love to hear from you.
Yes. Well, thank you. I haven't been to Boston in a while. The last time you said you were new to Boston. There's a pregnant building. Do you know where that is?
I really don't know a whole lot about the city because, I moved in January 2020 and then COVID hit 2 months later.
Yeah. But I bet it's cold.
Yeah. And it was cold when I moved, so I didn't want to go outside, but it's finally warming up. So hopefully I can explore a little bit.
Yes. Well, enjoy exploring. Boston is a fun place. I've been there a couple times. But Natasha, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thank you so much, Simone.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.